Hey guys, welcome back to the Puro Wrestling Academy. I am, of course, Ray Russell, and wow, just another week in the books. 1958, what a great time it was, talking all about a lot of firsts, but we got more firsts upcoming here in 1959 this week, and here to teach us all about it, he is the professor of Puro Wrestling himself, Mr. Dan Ginnetty. Dan, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back. 1959 is such a cool year. There are major things happening for JWA and Rikidozan in particular during the year of 1959. There are also some events that happen. To their credit, when you're the only wrestling promotion in Japan, everything you do is going to be the first time it happened. And 1959 is no different. There were going to be a couple of events that occur and you go, oh gosh, well, I wondered when that started. We're going to be able to relay these important events and important dates and the important outsiders, the gaijin that come in and help support the JWA and keep it running during the year of 1959. TV is back, as we spoke about at the end of 1958. TV continues, and thank goodness for it, because without some of the TV results, we wouldn't have the house show results at all for some of the shows.
Right, and they're on a bi-weekly TV program now, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, we're alternating with the Wide World of Disney, or whatever the actual, I think it was called The Land of Disney. And it was traditional, very popular show, high ratings for that show. And they alternated Sunday evenings with that show. I'm sorry, Friday evenings with that show. Okay. So we would have 26 episodes unless they have some kind of special. 26 episodes a year.
Right. And last episode, we ended with the tour concluding in January, I believe the 23rd of 1959 here. Going to pick back up here in just a moment with another tour. But before we jump into things, just some key notes, guys, as to what we're going to be discussing this week on the program. Here in 1959, we're going to kick off with a brief overview of what was going on in February and March here, early part of the year. Rikidozan going to disappear yet again from the ring for a bit, but he's going to act as color commentator for the television program. Things are going to pick back up after that, though, here in the JWA. We will see the Mr. Atomic series. Woo! It has finally arrived. From April through May 16th, the Mr. Atomic series, of course, led by Mr. Atomic himself, going to make his wrestling ring debut here in the JWA.
I can't help but be excited for Mr. Atomic. Anytime you have a masked wrestler coming in, you know what the angle is, you know what the approach is. Everyone knows it. Probably the Japanese fans in 1959 knew what they wanted to see when a masked bad guy comes into JWA for a tour, and it plays out like it does everywhere else in the history of pro wrestling. You know why? Because it works. The storyline works.
It certainly does. It certainly worked for me here as I went along in 59 and kind of did my research through your notes and everything I could find as well. Also this year, going to mark the very first episode of Japanese wrestling on colored TV. Brand new colored TV set here. Yeah, colored TV here coming to Japan, and we're going to see the first wrestling event in color.
We sure will, and as you might expect, Rikidozan being the resourceful person that he is, once his television show is in color, it wouldn't take him long before he would take advantage of yet another pro wrestling trope that, how do I say it, might have a stronger effect for the viewer if it's in color.
Indeed. As we go on here, another keynote, we're finally going to see, and as they used to say in the garden, after a lengthy absence, Kokichi Endo making his return to the JWA. He's been off in Hawaii, working the West Coast a little bit, but mainly in Hawaii for quite a while now, and it's good to see Kokichi Endo back after more than a year.
Yeah, both Kokichi Endo and Yoshinosato and are coming back to JWA. And I can't help but think that Rikidozan confided in them and said, listen, business is hard where we're at. If you want to go to Hawaii or go to the States or go anywhere else, I recommend it because at least you'll get paid. And all of his, if you think about it, Yoshinosato was getting a huge push and Kokichi Endo was his number one man for the longest time. So the fact that they have not been wrestling in JWA, and heck, wasn't it Toyombori, the same thing. He just came back last year. They all have been doing long stints outside of JWA, and I'm presuming it's because they wanted to get paid.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I mean, he's trying to keep his top dogs paid, certainly while there was absence of wrestling in Japan. Of course, the JWA's back, and we're going to see a lot of stars returning here to Japan in 1959. We're also going to see Rikidozan and his financial difficulties are going to continue, nearly leading to him writing some bad checks, guys. But we're also going to discuss how everything turns around after the creation of the World League Tournament. Something like 7 or 8 countries going to be represented here, heading into the month of May into June. 19 cards there as part of the World League Tournament, the very first ever league tournament in Japan.
It was a Hail Mary throw by Rikidozan. We're going to talk a lot more about it once the episode really gets going. But I have a metaphorical way of describing this or attaching it to a different situation in a different time frame that I think is going to ring true to the ears of the listeners tonight.
Oh, very cool. I love it. Love when you can interpret some context into things to where even simpletons like me can understand it, Dan. So looking forward to that. We're also going to look into maybe the first unmasking and one of the earliest blade jobs on Japanese wrestling TV. Maybe not one of the most prolific gushers of all time, but up to this point, certainly the most well-known.
True, it's going to be a big event, and you kind of gave it away, but I alluded to the value of color television to Rikidozan, and like I said previously, he didn't wait long before he threw that at the viewers. And can you imagine the effect of all those millions of people seeing that for the very first time on TV? It's like watching Elvis for the first time. These are watershed events in the world of Japanese professional wrestling and for the viewers of Japanese professional wrestling way back in, what was that, 65 years ago?
It's quite a ways back for sure. And I promise, guys, no big red X like in the WWF. Rikidozan going to let the blood flow here on some poor soul. We'll get to that later in the show. If we have time, we're also going to look at more tours coming to us. The international selection matches of the summer taking place from June through August. 41 cards on that tour. So, yeah, I'd say the JWA back up and running, but they're not done yet. And then there's an international competition of the fall taking place from September almost through the end of the year.
Yeah, that's a super long tour, but they've got it spaced out. So it's 40 shows. It's a lot of shows, but it's also 3 months long. Mm-hmm. It doesn't follow the same standards of what you would think a traditional Japanese pro wrestling tour is these days, that you're lucky to get it to go for a month and usually 25, 27 cards. It took 3 months to get 40 cards out of this tour.
And last but certainly not least here, at least in my 1959 notes, October 2nd, 1959 marks the very first time Japanese professional wrestling takes place broadcast live from a TV studio, Nippon Television Studios, Japanese Wrestling Studio TV.
I am going to have to look at my monstrous Japanese wrestling encyclopedia because I'd love to see a shot from the studio to see if it had more seats than, say, Memphis or Georgia TV, just to see what it looked like, because everyone's sitting in those chairs. If I do have a picture of it, that was the first time that ever happened. So that's kind of an impressive thing to be able to say you did.
For sure. I hope there are pictures out there, at least of one of the earliest studio shows here from Japan. It's kind of crazy to think about that. You know, you talk about Memphis and Georgia, of course, Jim Barnett bringing it up and using it in Indianapolis back around this time frame as well. But they do it here in Japan, and we're going to see if it's success or not as we continue on. And I think we can kick it all off. We can head back into the early part of 59, again, coming out of that tour that ended near the end of January, and we're back to TV. And I think last we left off, Dan, you were talking a little bit about a best of, a very special episode of television featuring Rikidozan.
That's true, Ray. But before we do that, I want to say that we've laid out the syllabus for this particular session. And because of that, class is in session.
Oh, good call. I almost missed that.
Almost. I got you. We're working together here. We're going to get through this. I do want to bring up the fact that the tour, it may have ended on the 23rd, but there was a show on February 6th that was taped for TV. Well, taped, it was a live broadcast. And the name of the show has been changed. It's now Pro Wrestling Broadcast. It will be known as going forward.
Put a lot of thought into that puppy.
Well, compared to all the other wrestling shows, this was the best name for the wrestling show. It was everyone's favorite name for a wrestling show because it was the only one. Rikidozan against Lucky Siminovich in the main event. Michiaki Yoshimura versus Yusuf Turk in the semi-main. And that gets us through the last house show they would have for a little while. We talked about the special episode on February 20th, and we moved to March 6th in Tokyo, Korakuen. Not Korakuen Hall yet, it's Korakuen Gymnasium. This is the show that has Rikidozan as a referee. He is not wrestling tonight. And the television episode gives us the top 2 matches, which are the only 2 matches we know of for this particular house show. The semi-main is Kanji Higuchi versus Masaki Takamura, and that's a single match, 30 minutes. The main event is a 6-man tag match, best out of 3 falls. Rikidozan the referee, Michiaki Yoshimura, and Nagasawa and Yosef Turk versus Yoshinosato returning, Toki Harold and Takeo Kaneko. Toki Harold I am not familiar with. I'm seeing if I can find him on the other shows.
Well, I'm seeing the results here. I see the team of Kaneko, Yoshinosato, and Toki go over here.
Yeah, that's strange. I'm just not familiar with that particular person.
I should point out, though, I don't want to overlook this because you mentioned it at the top of the program, that this also marks the return of Yoshinosato from Brazil. So he was here, the 6-man.
He was one of the 3 wrestlers that came back recently that was not in Hawaii or the States. He came back from Brazil. So it's his return. So now you've got like all the major players. Now with Azuma Fuji retiring, he's off the list. So we're back to Rikidozan, Kokichi Endo as his, who will be returning as his number 2 guy. You've got Toriumbori, who's already back, and now you've got Yoshinosato. So as far as I can tell, all of the JWA wrestlers that are kind of out and about are back home pretty early on in 1959.
Sounds like Ricky made a conference call and called all of his boys back to town.
Yeah, well, if the plan for the World League was in his mind and he started getting things ready for it, he probably realized he was going to need some help in order to get this thing rolling. March 20th is the next show we have. And again, the only reason we know about it is because it's on TV. And that match is the main event here. Does not have Rikidozan. This time he's not even a referee. He serves as a TV commentator. And they have a kind of a format for the show. It's an East versus West show featuring Yoshihara Isao versus Mr. Chin, Masayuki Tamanagawa versus Higuchi Kanji, Kaneko Takeo versus Hayanami Takeo. Oh, 2 Takeos. Interesting. And then there's an exhibition match with Michiaki Yoshimura versus Yoshinosato. So I think they're different weight classes, or they're similar weight classes, but it's a non-title match, I think is what I'm trying to get at.
Gotcha.
Because I think at this time, I think it's Yoshimura who still has the junior heavyweight title or whatever they're calling it these days.
There's so many titles going on, man. It's hard to say until we see them pop back up.
Yep. So from that, we do not have another show, and this is something that I'm not sure I understand. There's a show on April 3rd. So the tour for Mr. Atomic doesn't start till April 17th, but Mr. Atomic shows up on April 3rd.
Yeah, he's got to break in. He's got to get everybody used to this awesome character that is Mr. Atomic, the next big thing, right?
That is quite a build-up to get his own tour name. So the main event of the television episode for April 3rd, Friday, April 3rd, 1959, Yoshinosato versus Mr. Atomic. And of course, Mr. Atomic being the new bad guy goes over. There's a 30-minute time limit battle royal. And then we've got an undercard match as well. But now it's time to talk about Mr. Atomic, because this is a guy that obviously Rikidozan has invested a lot of thought into, and he's going to try to wring out every penny he can get out of this gimmick of the bad guy with the mask coming into Japan. There was a picture sent to the JWA publicity director of the Mr. Atomic, and Mr. Atomic, and we'll use his real name to start because it gets changed and then comes back. Clyde Steves. Mm-hmm. There's a picture that gets sent to the JWA publicity director, but Steve just looked like an average guy. And JWA turned him into the masked bad guy, Mr. Atomic. The name Atomic was taken from Mrs. Atomic, which was the title of a popular comic strip in Japan. Who would have known that? Thank goodness for the history of Japanese wrestling, the
Okay.
Rikidozan years. Get it on Amazon today, everybody. He would conceal a coin on his forehead inside his mask. I love it. And headbutt his opponents with it. Oh, my gosh.
A coin.
That's so pro wrestling.
That's awesome, man. I mean, hey, look, I'm not trying to make fun. I'm just having fun with it. But
a dollar coin is not small.
That's still badass, man. Right, for the 1950s, loading your mask here, using the headbutt to knock people. Man, it's just amazing what we're seeing going on here in the people. Decades later, people would say, "Oh, wrestling in Japan was so subdued, and everybody just went in there and they worked holds." I mean, going back to the 50s, Rikidozan's doing everything you've ever seen and then some here in the States.
Yeah, wrestling in Japan was so subdued that they only had a few fires in the ring, riots, and wrestling in pools. That's how subdued Japanese wrestling was in the 1950s. We're not even out of the 1950s yet, and we've seen all of that multiple times, including a ring that collapsed, or at least the stands collapsed.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So I love the gimmick. It's red meat. The crowd hates it every time. If you're not familiar with the mask and you put something in the front of the mask and headbutt the opponent with it, the same effect from the fans can be gotten from Iron Sheik loading up his boot. Sure. Once he loads up the boot and kicks somebody with his boot and the guy sells it like he got hit by a shotgun blast, the crowd just goes nuts. And I can only imagine the same thing happened with Mr. Atomic. But at that time, except for Yaki Rocha, a minor Mexican who worked for Masahiro Kimura's group in 1956, which was probably seen by at least 9 to 12 people, Steve's was, for all intents and purposes, the first masked wrestler to wrestle in Japan in front of a real audience.
Right.
And at the time,
he had quite a career. Steve's did, working under the hood. He worked as one of the many Golden Terrors, the Shadow. Of course, a lot of thought into the Shadow, the Preacher, and of course, Mr. Atomic here. I think he had to be somewhere around 30 years old at this point, but he had been in the business for quite a while. Had to have broke in at least, I'd say, a decade prior to this. So it's just kind of funny to see him here doing this gimmick, and a guy who was maybe more so a journeyman, but Rikidozan knew how to use him and get him over with fun. Worked the West Coast and the States a lot. He worked in Australia, but here we are. And I saw a match of him recently when we first looked into this, and I saw Clyde Steve. I said, I know that name, but not really familiar with him in the ring. And there's actually a match of him against Antonino Rocca on YouTube for anybody who wants to go check it out. But unfortunately, he is not Mr. Atomic in that match.
Well, that's too bad. But if you do get to see Steve's in that match against Antonino Rocca, you might see what they perceived at the time, just a guy that looked like an average guy. And they were looking for a little more spice in the JWA, so they put a mask on him, and off he went to fame and fortune as Mr. Atomic. And at the time, there was a weekly TV drama in Japan that featured a famous masked hero who played the role of getting rid of villains with crazy maneuvers. The Moonlight Mask, which is an accurate translation of his Japanese name, was a good guy who loved justice. On the record cover of his theme songs, oh my goodness, a TV guy with a record of his theme songs. Someone translated it as the Moon Masked Rider. Uh-oh, don't tell Dusty. This is where he got it. Moonlight Mask had a huge following for TV and entertained young TV viewers all over Japan. So this paragraph that I just read for the first time is really implying that the idea of a masked man is kind of current and popular in Japanese culture at the time that Mr. Atomic comes out. So this is a bad guy mask guy instead of a good guy mask guy. And that's why maybe the fans would take to it, because it's kind of in the zeitgeist, so to speak.
Sure. And Moon Masked Rider, man, that's so close to the Midnight Rider, ain't it? It's crazy.
It is. We'll have to cover that when we do our history of Florida wrestling after Japan's done.
You know, I think about Bill Eadie and Blackjack Mulligan butchering the Japanese language, doing the machines gimmick, trying to have fun with that. I can only imagine Dusty trying to be a Japanese Midnight Rider here. I don't know.
Oh my gosh. So even though Mr. Atomic was a bad guy who fought battles against the good Japanese wrestlers, he'd already become tremendously unpopular in Hokkaido by the time the first World League tour started. Mr. Atomic generated a lot of heat and brought a lot of people to the arenas. The best way to describe his run in Japan is that the fans loved to hate him.
Getting over, right?
Yeah, talk about it's getting over, getting heat. Classic wrestling maneuvers work because that's why they're classic, is because they work consistently. Bad guy in a mask, so you have that danger, intrigue, and at any point during a match, if you want to deviate from, the storyline or the chain wrestling, then the good guy can always go for the bad guy's mask, and you can have a match that is really, the story is all about the good guy trying to get the mask off the bad guy. Much to the detriment, usually you lose because you lost focus on the wrestling and you're going after the mask instead. It's such a great storyline. It works every time you use it. It's just fun to see this stuff getting played out in Japan as we've seen it played out so many times in America. And the fans loving to hate him, that's just heat. You got to be able to get that heat, and he did it. He cheated with the big coin in his forehead. I wish I could be sitting there watching and just smiling ear to ear, watching him do maneuvers that the crowd's going to go nuts for.
All we can do is envision it in our minds, but man, if some of this popped up, man, I'd mark out for it for sure to see some of this Mr. Atomic stuff as he gets his own series. Not TV series, guys, but rather his own tour, so to speak. He's headlining in many matches here throughout the tour, as it would be expected based on the fact that it's called the Mr. Atomic series. And so I see he's in here, works. I'll let you run down some of the matches here, but I do see the only other Gaijin on this tour is the Bulldog. Danny Plechas is back, and he's going to work sometimes as the tag team partner of one Mr. Atomic.
Correct. This has got to be a cheap tour because they only used a couple outsiders. On April 17th, again, we're going off of TV results because there's very little results during this time. It's like a dark times of traditional press covering pro wrestling for some reason. But on April 17th in Tokyo, Korakuen Gymnasium, we've got Yoshinosato and Mr. Chin versus Nagasawa and Takeo Kaneko in the semi-main. The main event is Michiaki Yoshimura versus Mr. Atomic, which I believe he won that match. So Mr. Atomic has now in 2 matches beaten Yoshinosato and Michiaki Yoshimura. So he's starting to take care of things and work his way up. There's really only one guy left for him to fight unless they want to get Torium involved. Well, and this match, I should say April 17th has another note regarding it, is this is the first professional wrestling event that was broadcast in color in Japan.
Color TV, just in time for the Mr. Atomic character. Maybe he's the one that brought color TV to the Japanese wrestling world. This guy's so special. We gotta put this in color, baby. I don't know why I keep going back to Dusty here. It's the gimmick. It's the gimmick, man. It's so gimmicky.
It warms my heart to see gimmicks like this be effective. That's
yes.
all. And if I was Mr. Atomic and during an interview, I would totally take credit for bringing color wrestling, color television.
What a great promo that would have been
to Japan. Oh my gosh, just to take credit for outrageous things. We all would be good heels, I think.
Well, you said it. You said, man, there's really nobody left to take on for Mr. Atomic here except for the Big Dog. But the Big Dog going to call on some of his friends, and now they're starting to return to the promotion. And it looks like the next show here, I think we're on May the 1st, it looks like somebody else going to step in and challenge Mr. Atomic.
Sure would be, and I don't know where you go from this, because for the longest time, Kokichi Endo has been Rikidozan's #1 guy. And on Friday, May 1st, the main event of that television show is, in fact, Yokishi Endo fighting Mr. Atomic. Actually, looking at it now, Kokichi Endo defeats Mr. Atomic.
Right.
Which kind of surprises me. That's strange that he would beat him.
I agree booking-wise. Yes, I agree booking-wise. Why would you put somebody else over Mr. Atomic leading into the Rikidozan? They're coming, Mr. Atomic and Rikidozan, but the only thing I can come up with, Dan, is Kokichi Endo just returned. This may be his first match back, so I guess they had to put him over on the way back in.
Yeah, they're selling his return as the returning hero, and this guy comes back with new moves, more experience, and he was Rikidozan's #1 guy. I wish we had more details. Maybe it was a schmoz finish of some type, but I'm reading very clearly Kokichi Endo does get the win over Mr. Atomic on May 1st. And we're going to move into the tour proper from here because it's the first house show result we have that isn't related to TV. May 8th, we actually have Rikidozan here returning to the ring in competition in the main event, teaming with Toyombori against the team of Mr. Atomic and, as you mentioned, Danny Plechas. and that resulted in a DQ. I don't see anyone else of note that we want to talk about. Endo's second from the top, Yoshimura's second from the top, Yoshinosato's third from the top. That covers everybody. And there's really 5 guys in this promotion, and you just went through all 5.
And they kind of alternate from there on the rest of the house shows here for the duration of May, for the most part. Anyway, tag team action, it's either Rikidozan teaming with Endo or Tainobori. Either way, they continue to go over on Mr. Atomic and Danny Plechas.
That's correct. And they just cycle through. He rotates between those top 2 guys. So I guess based on this, maybe we can decide or determine that Tourney is, if he's not Rikidozan's number 1 guy, it's like 1A. He's the backup guy. And Yoshimura and Yoshinosato are beneath them.
Right. I think that's pretty much distinguished at this point. I agree with you.
The May 15th tag match appears on television with Rikidozan and Tourney against Mr. Atomic and Danny Plechas. And in this match, Tourney and Rikidozan get the win over Mr. Atomic and Danny Plechas. I would wager Plechas is probably taking the pin there, just because why ruin the guy with the mask? You've got more money to make with him, I would think. Although this is coming up to the end of the tour. And interestingly enough, I believe the last show of the tour, I just want to make sure it is the last show of the tour on May 16th. The main event in Sapporo is Rikidozan defeating Danny Plechas. So this entire tour, with the exception of the win over Endo, I don't think Mr. Atomic gets beat by anybody else in a singles match, based on what we have for information.
Right. Based on all the results I can find, Kokichi Endo is the only one that has a singles victory over Mr. Atomic, and I'm on board with you. I'm assuming Plechas is doing the job in the tag team matches. Some of those even end in DQ, by the way. But going through here, I'm total agreement. Everything I see here, I don't see... clearly, they're saving the one-on-one between Mr. Atomic and Rikidozan for down the line, which is not too far away. I don't want to spoil anything, but they're saving it for very good reason.
I was just going to say, with the brainchild, Rikidozan's grand plan of this World League concept, a big tournament that he thinks is going to get JWA back on its feet financially, maybe he's saving that big match with Mr. Atomic for somewhere in the World League tournament.
I thought for sure we were going to get Ricky and Mr. Atomic in the Mr. Atomic series, but again, it just shows the brains behind Rikidozan here, Dan, in regards to he knew what he was doing.
He definitely did, and he even named the tour after it. So beyond the one loss to the returning Kokichi Endo, Mr. Atomic was unscathed for his own tour that was named after him.
Right.
And that makes sense when you have grander plans for him. It's not just bringing some guys in, beating them ball by the end of the tour, and then sending them away. He's got more to do with Mr. Atomic than one might believe coming off of this April to May tour.
Yeah, and other people may have not had the foresight to invest in this and build it towards another tour. Naming it after the character, you would feel that maybe some guys, if they were booking this, they would have wrote him off at the end and said, all right, we got what we can out of him. But instead, this entire Mr. Atomic series tour is really just to build him up for things to come.
Very true. Now, one thing that we've been talking about over the last couple of shows was the financial state of the JWA compared to Rikidozan's financial state. Rikidozan is having apartment buildings built. He hasn't gotten to the point. He hasn't built the bowling alley yet. It's coming. He is a huge businessman, wheeler dealer outside the ring, books, movies, all that stuff. But his promotion, not doing very well. He's had financial difficulties for more than 2 years at this point in May of 1959. And he had come very close to issuing a, quote, dishonored bill at one time, which is the Japanese expression for a bad check. And you don't want to do that because that technically, if you mail it, that's a federal crime. That's mail fraud, and it can really be difficult. So that's how bad off Rikidozan was. And that's why he was always on the run, running from people who wanted money from him, running from his own wrestlers who were saying, when are we going to get paid?
Hiding out in Hawaii and writing notes.
Yeah. He would go to a different part of the planet in order to avoid paying what other people needed from him.
Right.
So he decided at some point to host a large-scale international event and invite 7 wrestlers from various parts of the world into a big round-robin tournament. and the name of the event was the World League. Yeah, we'll go through the people who are going to participate in it, and then we've got some more background and some quotes from press conferences related to this inaugural World League.
We're coming fresh off of that Mr. Atomic series, too. That just concluded a week prior. This World League series begins a week later, May 21st, going to run through the middle of June.
Yeah, and of all the mass wrestlers, don't they almost always come from parts unknown?
Typically.
Almost always.
Well, almost always, right? Well, I mean, the Conquistadors were from somewhere in Latin America, but yeah.
I haven't thought about them in a zillion years. Oh, my goodness. I like them. They were fine. Okay, so the 7, in regards to this tour, or this tournament, the 7 countries represented were Hungary in the form of King Kong, who was a big deal of 55, 56, 57. Mm-hmm. The USA is going to be represented by Danny Plechas, who's holding over from the prior tour. India is going to be represented by Tarlok Singh, who we have seen before. I just can't remember which year. We've been doing so many of these, it's hard to remember which year now. England is going to be represented by Lord James Blears. Latin America, Enrique Torres. You may remember Enrique Torres as the favorite tag partner of Rikidozan during his seasoning in California. Am I correct with that?
Correct, absolutely, yeah. They were teaming up more often than not for quite a while there.
Yep, Mexico's represented by Jess Ortega, and now we know where Mr. Atomic comes from. He's representing Germany. So a lot of these guys are people that Rikidozan's wrestled with before, made money with before, and it's kind of like a greatest hits where he's bringing all these known stars from other parts of the world for this particular tournament. So it's a big deal, and it looks like he's making good choices on who to bring in to represent because he's wrestled all these guys.
I'm looking at this, and Bull Ortega, those were some damn good matches he had with Bull with last time Jess Ortega came through here. King Kong Czaya, he absolutely main evented with. I remember those. Again, you talked about Enrique Torres and them teaming up on the West Coast, but Rikidozan also worked a lot against Lord James Blears in the main events over there in the West Coast as well. So he knows a lot of these guys very, very well. And I'd say he did a pretty good job of putting together this group.
I agree with you. And you think about Rikidozan at this time, desperate to make money, willing to do just about anything to make money, I would think. But look at the people he picks for this tour. There are good matches here, too. So somewhere in his brain, Rikidozan still realizes he needs to put on a good show and have good wrestling matches if he really wants to win over the fans.
Right.
Because he could have picked a bunch of other guys and they wouldn't have been good matches. But I like this lineup. I keep looking at, like you said, some of the footage we've already seen of these guys. These guys could all work, and Rikidozan's worked well with all of them. So I'm curious to see how this will play out. We're going to go back to a little bit of discussion regarding Clyde Steves, Mr. Atomic. He was really American, folks, but the Japanese fans thought he was of German origin. So Rikidozan said, I'll run with it. That's Germany. That's the 7th country. There it is. Parts unknown Germany. Just don't have the town name. Hundreds of wrestlers came from that part of the world. So from parts unknown must have been a country of its own. I'm glad that this was brought up because it was in my head too about the parts unknown. This appears to be from an interview or a press conference. Rikidozan saying, quote, "The purpose of the upcoming league match is to prove that the Japanese are strong and that we are the best in the world." After this, singles matches between top Japanese wrestlers became taboo. So this was the end of round-robin tournaments where Japanese were facing Japanese for a long time. It would come back, and we will get to that time when it's covered. But for now, this is going to be the last run-through where it's Japanese against Japanese. We're going to focus on Japanese against foreigners after this.
Right. A format that would seemingly work for decades to come.
Decades and decades, I agree. And it works, and people are hesitant to give away. It makes sense when there are only so many Japanese stars. Do you really want to have them facing each other and possibly take the push away from one when you could generate revenue with him?
Right.
So it is risky because you risk the chance of taking a superstar and making him into a mid-carder because of a loss or how it's viewed. And we're going to see that with the IWE coming up in 18 more episodes, where we're going to see something that happens to IWE's first ace, where they said, here's our guy, we're hitching our wagon to him. And he has one match that reduces his status in the eyes of the fans, and he never, ever gets it back. So that's just a little bit of foreshadowing. I'm planting a little seed in the listeners' ears. You'll hear more about this coming up in a future episode. So before this tour starts, the day before the first event, there was a demonstration open practice held at the Pro Wrestling Center. King Kong and Turlock Singh refused to go to the open practice because they didn't want to show off what moves they were going to use. Smart. They came to the ring in plain clothes saying, we ain't showing you guys anything. Lord Blears revealed a leg lock. Torres showed a cobra twist. Ortega and Atomic showed off some rough moves. But this was an open practice that has, coming off of this series or this tournament, has become a regular event before the start of the series now. It's kind of like a preview for the fans to see what to expect from the outside invaders, what they can offer, what style of wrestling they utilize.
So we get some teasers and we get a couple heels in there as well. I'm not showing you anything. I'm not showing my hand.
Yeah, I love it. Classic heel move. Hey, I'm here to see your moves. No. Love it. So easy. It's so easy. Let's see. What else do we have here? I just want to make sure I cover everything as the setup. The World League is super important to Rikidozan. He has a lot invested in it, and this is where I'm going to make the correlation to something that happened in 1985. All right. There was a guy by name of Vincent Kennedy McMahon, Vince Jr., who had leveraged and mortgaged everything to get WrestleMania off the ground, and it was all or nothing. You think about the position of the JWA at this point. He owes everyone everything. He almost wrote a bad check, which would get him arrested. So Rikidozan is got nothing left. It's all or nothing with this one World League. And if it doesn't work, I think they'll probably just be done. Because if they can't get any more money from the network TV episodes, they can't keep running anymore. Heck, most of the wrestlers aren't even being paid at this time. And I think it's very similar to the position Vince McMahon found himself in after paying money to all the local television stations in other territories to air the WWF shows. I believe that's also why he sold the shares and gave Crockett the time slot back on TBS. He sold whatever his shares were for $1 million to help fund WrestleMania 1.
Right.
Some of these things are very similar to the position that Rikidozan's in when he comes up with the idea for this World League. So just keep that in mind as we go through the World League and see how it goes, because as of right now on the, the 20th of May, when they have the open tryouts, nobody's bought a ticket yet. I mean, we don't know the results. We don't know how they do. We don't know anything about how this tournament's going to run. It's all an idea in Rikidozan's head, and we're about to find out what happens. The first annual World League runs from May 21st to June 15th. There are 19 shows. We've already covered the 7 foreigners. We're going to find out who the locals are, but it's a round-robin tournament, I believe, with just 3 of the main event guys that are in the tournament. We'll go through the results and we'll see more just to confirm that. The very first show, Tokyo Metropolitan Gym, 15,000 people. Can you imagine the sweat coming off of Rikidozan's brow when he sees that kind of a sellout or close to a sellout on the very first show of the World League?
Yeah, and I see, some of the notes even state that upwards to 2,000 fans were actually turned away. Boy, that's got to feel good. It's got to suck. Man, I really want their money, but they had to be turned away. They couldn't get them in the arena.
That's a good sign. He says, maybe I've got him, and he's got a grand plan. Remember, there's 18 more cards after this. So he's probably going to make arrangements, maybe have extra seats out. He's going to get the money from these guys.
And this is the old, we would see this would become very accustomed to what we would see in the later league tournaments too. Not only are these guys out there reportedly in ethnic costumes, but they're wearing the old sashes with their names on them.
That's what we would see for the upcoming Real World Tag League tournaments with the sashes where they display themselves. I think Madison Square Garden Tag League tournament for New Japan did it as well. The pomp and circumstance of this, it is probably reminiscent some degree of sumo, probably. I'm just guessing there. Because I feel like sumo, they took a lot of the sumo pageantry and just converted it into the Japanese wrestling product.
Right.
So for the 3 World League tournament matches on this particular show, 3 rounds, 8 minutes a round. Interesting. Mr. Atomic defeats Lord James Blears. by pin in the third round. King Kong defeats Danny Plechas in the second round, and Rikidozan goes to a time limit draw with Jess Ortega.
His old nemesis.
On the very first show.
There's not a whole lot of footage of them two out there against each other, but man, what's out there is pretty damn good. I would like to have seen that, a time limit draw between those two.
Yeah, physically, he doesn't, maybe we're just spoiled because now everybody looks like a bodybuilder, but Jess Ortega didn't look like he would be particularly spry, but he was really a good athlete and he could move.
Yeah.
It just, his shape, his body shape may have belied that a bit.
Kind of like a bull.
Hey,
that's where they
good
came up
point.
with it.
Good point. Yeah, I figure stuff out. We learn something new every day. So let's go to the second show, again in the Metropolitan Gym in Tokyo. This one I don't have an attendance for.
Deck. Holy shit.
Yeah. This is a big one, and this one features a main event that is not World League related. The 3 tournament matches for this show, Kokichi Endo goes to a time limit draw with Danny Plechas, which is 24 minutes because it's 3 8-minute rounds.
Right.
Lord James Blears time limit draw with Enrique Torres. And Tarlok Singh would defeat Mr. Atomic by DQ in the second round. And then we get to the main event. Rikidozan and Torian versus King Kong and Jesse Ortega. Rikidozan and Torian take the win 2-1. Torian gets a bear hug submission off of Kong, which I would have loved. Yeah, I really wish I had brought my book down with me. It's so big. I'd like to think that for the 1959 thing, there might be a picture. Either that or the Showa Pro Wrestling magazine might have it.
For anybody who wants to get an idea of just how big King Kong Czaya was, just go Google it or look it up on YouTube. He's got some video footage out there. He's a pretty big dude to be submitting to a bear hug.
Agreed. And if I do get pictures of this, we'll be sure to include it in your insanely detailed notes.
Yes. For
those Patreon supporters, you'll get to see more stuff from these guys if I have it in my archives. Next show.
Final fall. I think I cut you off before we got to the final fall.
You got me on the final fall. So Rikidozan, who previously drew against Ortega, this time Rikidozan gets the pin to win the match against Ortega in 1:43. So you're looking at total bell-to-bell time of just over 20 minutes for that main event. So this is a big show. I would like to see the attendance for this because I think it would do better. I'm looking at it, and this is a better show top to bottom. I get to see Kokichi Endo. You get to see a big tag team match. I like this show better than the first show, so I'm curious to see what it really drew. I might be able to find that somewhere down the line, but we just don't have that information right now.
Well, we do have information as far as the fans go for most of these shows anyway.
That's true. May 24th in Gifu Civic Center to 6,000 people. We only have the World League tournament matches and the main event here. Rikidozan defeats Tarlok Singh in the first round with a half crab. Torian Bori defeats Jess Ortega. Oh, double count out of ring.
Double count out.
I was going to say, he's not taking a pin over Jess Ortega. King Kong defeats Kokichi Endo in the second round. And in the main event, Mr. Atomic and Danny Plechas defeat the team of Enrique Torres and Lord Blears. So you have all outsiders in the main event. I wonder if that's happened before.
I love the layout here of 3 World League matches on the card. And then you get these tag team main events on top of it with guys that are part of the World League, but aren't necessarily in the matches that week or that night. So I'm really liking the format of these house shows. Great job by Rikidozan and company, whoever put all this together.
Yeah, this is a direct rip, or Baba would rip this off directly for the Real World Tag League tours, because during the shows where your tag team wasn't in a league match, they might fight another tag team that's in the tournament, but as a non-tournament match, or they'll kind of swap one guy out, and it made some really interesting main events for those shows. And again, we'll get to those when it's time to talk about All Japan. But this technique that Rikidozan's using all the way back in 1959 would get picked up back up by Baba in 1977.
Hey guys, Ray Russell here, curator of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, inviting you guys to listen to many of the programs here as part of the WrestleCopia brand, including, but not limited to, the Wrestling Memory Grenade, currently covering the 1988 and the WWF project. You can also listen to the Regional Wrestling Podcast, where we talk the territories, whether it's Jamie Ward with Georgia 81, Roman Gomez with the UWF in 1986, or Gene Jackson covering Memphis in 85. 3 projects going on right now over there at Regional Wrestling. You can also listen to the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. Bob goes back in time each and every week, covering not just his career, but countless stories and interactions with hundreds of wrestling names spanning his 2 decades in the business. But that's not all. You can also check out the Puro Wrestling Academy with the professor of Puro Resu, Mr. Dan Ginnetty. Dan and I go back in time and cover the history of Japanese professional wrestling in the English language. And you can listen to all of those shows and more, all part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, located over at WrestleCopia.com. That's WrestleCopia.com, and anywhere your podcast streaming needs are met, from Apple to Spotify, Pocket Cast, and beyond. And while you're at it, why not subscribe to our social media guys for all the latest goings on here at the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Plus, I'm constantly adding old school video clips and pictures from throughout wrestling history. You can follow us over on X, formerly Twitter, at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow and like me, Facebook.com/Wrestling Grenade. And why not subscribe to YouTube.com/Wrestling Grenade. And of course, now would be a fantastic time to become a WrestleCopia patron. I'm talking about that $5 all access tier over at patreon.com/WrestleCopia. That address again, patreon.com/WrestleCopia, where you get so many gifts for just $5, including all of my insanely detailed show notes for every episode of The Grenade Show, Regional Wrestling, and the Monday Warfare podcast. You'll also get early access to a lot of the podcasts here on the WrestleCopia brand, where you can listen days and sometimes as much as a week earlier than the rest of the listeners. We also offer remastered versions of the earliest episodes of The Grenade Show, covering the 1989 NWA project. Includes enhanced sound quality, plus new content and conversation never heard before. But that's still not all, guys. You also get at least a dozen digital downloads for your viewing and reading pleasure each and every month, plus random bonus video drops, and of course, the Patreon-exclusive Watch-Along series, covering many past WWF and WCW events. And if that's not all, videocasts, also now a part of Patreon. And for those who like all of their podcasts in one nice, neat little pile, the WrestleCopia Patreon also offers a Patreon-exclusive Spotify account. You can actually go over to your Spotify with your WrestleCopia Patreon credentials. Instead of listening or downloading directly from Patreon, you can go over to Spotify, listen to all the latest shows, including all of the early releases. And you get all of that and so much more for just $5. No subscription, cancel anytime. Give it a try for a month, guys. I think you'll like the content that I offer, and every penny of it goes right back here into paying the bills. So if you're looking to support that next up-and-coming podcast brand, please consider making it WrestleCopia. Help me pay some of the bills to keep the WrestleCopia Podcast Network and all of the great shows here up and running for the months and the years to come.
The next show is May 25th in Nagoya in the Kaneyama Gym in front of 8,000 people. Your World League matches, Toyombori time limit draw against Mr. Atomic. So Mr. Atomic is still looking good here. King Kong defeats Tarlok Singh in the second round. And Jess Ortega goes to a draw against Danny Plechas. And in the main event, Rikidozan and Kokichi Endo against Enrique Torres and Lord Blears. I feel like I'm in California in 1954 again. Blears pins Rikidozan, interesting, in 29 minutes. Rikidozan gets a pin on Blears 20 minutes later, so you're almost 50 minutes into the match, and they would go to a 60-minute time limit draw. So there's a lot of wrestling with just 4 matches.
That's a long night. You got 3 time limit draws on this show.
Yeah, just these 4 matches alone, you could have a show with just the 4 matches, and it's over 2 hours of bell to bell.
May have been what they did, too, based on the results I have anyway.
Yeah. Next show is May 26th. I did scroll past it. In Osaka, in front of 12,000 people. Another huge crowd.
Absolutely.
World League matches. Mr. Atomic defeating King Kong by pin in the 3rd round. Enrique Torres pinning Tarlock Singh in the 2nd. Jess Ortega pinning Kokichi Endo in the 3rd. Main event, Rikidozan and Toriambori defeating Lord Blears and Danny Plechas 2 falls to 1 in what looks to be just over 20 minutes. So that's kind of a quickie. May 27th is your next show, so we're moving right along. This one is also in Osaka Prefectural Gym in front of 10,000 people this time. Rikidozan and Kokichi Endo, 45-minute time limit draw against Mr. Atomic and Lord Blears. Atomic pins Endo in the first fall. Rikidozan can't even get a pin on him, can only get a count out of ring under Atomic, so that's still brewing. That is unfinished business, so to speak, between Rikidozan and Atomic, even all the way halfway through this tournament. The tournament matches for this show, Toriambori would pin Tarlock Singh in the 2nd round. Enrique Torres pins Danny Plechas in the 3rd round. Jess Ortega, double count out of ring in the 2nd round with King Kong.
Boy, Tarlock Singh's not having a great tour yet.
Somebody's got to be the enhancement talent. When you have all the all-stars, not all of them are going to win every match. So Tarlock Singh is basically shining everybody else.
The Starcade 89 Muta at this point.
They must have known Muta was long gone. I would never have done that to a guy with that kind of talent, regardless. 10 minutes of thinking about it could have come up with a million other solutions than what they did to him in that pay-per-view, which was a tough pay-per-view to watch. It was 2 tournaments, tag tournament and singles tournament. It was
rough to get through. I covered that at length on my Grenade show a couple years back, and it was. I looked at all the talent on the roster at the time there, and I was just like, why? Why are we doing this? But it's whatever. Why
are we getting 5-minute matches with all these guys that really could go 40 minutes if they wanted and have a good match, but they were just trying to jam them in? Poor Muta. Luckily, he recovered from that bad performance.
Yeah, something tells me he did all right.
Yeah, I think that guy might have made something for himself. May 28th, Osaka Prefectural Gym. We're back in Osaka. 12,000 this time, and we don't have what I would call like a main event. We just have the 3 World League matches. Enrique Torres time limit draw against Kokichi Endo, so that's still making Kokichi Endo look strong. Jess Ortega with a pin over Tarlock Singh in the 2nd round. Poor Tarlock. Justice for Tarlock. That's a T-shirt we'll have to do. And the other tournament match, Rikidozan pinning King Kong in the 2nd round. Wow. That's a big move for Rikidozan, getting a pin. Oh, here it is. So there's a note that there was a possible main event, and really they probably figured it just from the main players that weren't on the card as written. Mr. Atomic and Danny Plechas versus Lord James Blears and Toriambori. Interesting.
That would have been interesting.
That would work, and Toriambori may have tagged with Lord James Blears during one of his runs over there. That's just a guess on my part. But he definitely wouldn't be fighting on the team of Plechas and Atomic, so Lord James Blears makes more sense than those other 2. Well, this tournament that he's pinning all his hopes for to make money, we finally get one of these shows televised, because it's every 2 weeks.
Unfortunately, so maybe it's the smallest crowd.
Yes, it is. He can't win them all. He's going to do okay. I believe in Rikidozan here. In May 29th in Kobe, on television, aired from 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock, live broadcast. We get a tag match main event, and we get 1 World League official match. So I wonder how that worked if they jammed the tag team as the semi-main and had the World Leagues earlier. Again, the formatting of these house show results leaves me to question, but we'll cover the World League matches first. Lord James Blears defeats Tarlock Singh, of course, in the 2nd round with a backslide. Torres gets a double count out of ring. So it's a double count out of ring. Nobody wins against Danny Plechas. And Rikidozan against Mr. Atomic. Time limit draw.
And no shocker. The match that airs on TV is Rikidozan and Mr. Atomic. It's almost like he booked it that way.
Almost like that, where he finally gets a hold of Mr. Atomic and doesn't beat him. It's a time limit draw. It's almost like they're building to something. The tag match that would be the semi-main for the TV broadcast would be Tourney and Kokichi Endo versus Jess Ortega and King Kong. That would have been an interesting match. Tourney had already defeated King Kong with a bear hug and in one of the prior matchups, and Kokichi Endo has always been pushed in JWA. This might have been a competitive and interesting match.
Well, competitive perhaps, but it looks like Endo scoring 2 falls here, 2 straight falls for the baby faces, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, so this is a big put over for Endo, and I wonder if this is for payment for services rendered, if he's got a big job coming up where he's about to suffer some injurious pin for his gimmick. We'll see what happens, because we've got a few more shows to go through.
Right.
May 31st in Kumamoto City Gym in front of 10,000 people. Only 2 league matches on this show that I see. Tourney pinning Jess Ortega in the 3rd round. Kokichi Endo winning by DQ against Mr. Atomic in the 2nd round. Main event, Rikidozan and Enrique Torres back together again.
Yeah, putting the band back together.
After 6 years against...
It's been a while.
Defeating Lord Blears and Danny Plechas 2 straight falls. Torres takes 1. Rikidozan takes the other. That's a feel-good match there. I got to think there's more matches on this show.
Baby faces going over all night, man. Rikidozan and Torres, Tourney and Endo all scoring wins here.
They just want to send the fans home happy. They know what it takes to make the fans happy. And let's see if they make them happy on June 1st, 1959 in Kagoshima in the Athletic Stadium in front of 8,000 people. Only 2 more league matches. Kokichi Endo taking a draw against Tarlok Singh. Oh my gosh. No wonder he won. He was the guy to get the pins in 2 straight falls.
Got to give him a point somewhere, man.
Imagine the discussion saying, hey, Kokichi, what I need you to do is I need you to go to a draw with Tarlok Singh. And Endo's like, are you serious? I said, yeah, we got to give him something. And it's like, are you kidding me? Says,
I certainly hope Tarlok Singh's countrymen weren't able to watch any of this.
Yep, and I'd say, don't forget that match where I gave you both pins in a 2-fall-to-nothing match. That's what this is for.
Yeah, the time of the draw.
Poor guy. I feel bad for him. And then the main event would have been Enrique Torres and Tourney teaming and defeating the team of Jess Ortega and King Kong. 2 falls to 1. Tourney defeating Kong in the 2nd fall with another bear hug. Interesting.
Yeah, interesting spot. They went back to the well there with that again. I don't know if you covered it or not. The other World League match, I don't know if you mentioned it. I missed it if you did. The other one on this particular show was Rikidozan beating Danny Plechas in the 2nd round.
Oh, yeah. I went off on that tangent about Kokichi Endo going to a draw with the only guy with no wins in the tournament. So I totally forgot the main event. Rikidozan defeating
I hope somebody's
Plechas.
out there is keeping track of all these wins and losses as we run through them here.
Yeah, this is kind of a mess. The picture, it makes a lot more sense. They have one of those tournament bracket things.
Right.
And it's easier to understand because there's just so many people involved, the format and how they show it. Someday we'll have to talk about it. When we go to video, we'll be able to show it on the screen and explain it.
Absolutely.
June 4th. Yep. In Oita Prefectural Gym in front of 5,000 people. We've got 2 World League matches here. Jess Ortega defeating Lord Blears in the 3rd round with a backbreaker. And here we go again. Tourney defeating King Kong in the 2nd round with a bear hug.
I'm thinking King Kong just didn't want to take any bumps. He's like, if you're going to beat me, just put me in a bear hug.
Yeah, and it's a good gimmick because the fans must go crazy because who else is strong enough to lift King Kong? Mm-hmm. Main event there, Rikidozan Kokichi Endo defeating Mr. Atomic and Danny Plechas, 2 falls to 1. And finally, we have, in the 3rd fall, Rikidozan getting a pin on Mr. Atomic. Now, I don't think that's going to be the end of this.
No, I don't believe so either, but I believe that is the first time that I've seen that Rikidozan actually scores a pinfall over the Masked Man.
I agree with you there. We move on to June 5th in Fukuoka in front of another 5,000 people, just like last time. 3 World League matches on this show.
There you go.
Thanks. Kokichi Endo pinning Tarlok Singh. Yay! Wait a minute.
Why would they fight twice in the same turn? Well, I don't know, man.
Oh my God!
I hope these better be making sense at the end of the day.
I'm afraid to even look now. This is becoming like that WCW Cruiserweight tournament where I think they were fighting like Damien 666 fought D. Malenko like 3 times in the same tournament.
Well, it's better than the tag tournament they did where they realized they never kept track of the brackets and they just like scrapped it and started it all over again.
It's
God
terrible.
bless. Then they wonder why WCW died.
Yeah. So in this time in the World League match, Kokichi Endo pins Tarlok Singh in the 3rd round. Enrique Torres pins King Kong in the 2nd round. Interesting. And Mr. Atomic pins Jess Ortega in the 3rd round.
Oh, that would have been a fun one.
Yeah, main event, Rikidozan Toriambori defeating the team of Lord Blears and Danny Plechas. 2 straight falls. Toriambori with a bear hug. Oh boy, it looks like it's his new finisher. And Rikidozan with just a regular pin against Plechas.
Getting it over, man.
Yeah, it works. And people must like seeing it. It is a feat of strength to some degree.
I'm thinking he wouldn't have done it this many times in a row if it wasn't getting a response from the crowd.
Yeah, or they're just going to hammer it over until the fans live with it. Go, I guess it's going to be another bear hug. June 6th in Kokura, Fukuoka City Gym, 8,000 people are there to see Mr. Atomic pinning Tarlok Singh in the 2nd round. Jess Ortega pinning Enrique Torres in the 3rd. Rikidozan pinning Lord James Blears in the 2nd round. The main event, Toriambori and Kokichi Endo defeating King Kong and Danny Plechas, 2 falls to 1. Toriambori defeats Kong in the final fall, not with a bear hug, but with a toe hold.
Oh, he took a bump in that match.
Yep, he at least on the ground long enough for someone to grab his toe.
Wow, we got some good ones coming up here, the next couple of pieces of business here in regards to this tour.
Yeah, I've got a TV taping. I believe it airs delayed, though. So we're going to get up to this one, June 8th in Hiroshima, Municipal Nikko Pool, another pool show in front of 18,000 people.
It's got to be their best numbers yet.
So far for this tour, it is, and probably
tour.
The biggest show that they've had in maybe
Quite
over a year.
Yeah.
Yep. World League matches, Danny Plechas pins Tarlok Singh in the 2nd round. Kokichi Endo defeats Lord James Blears in the 3rd round with a backslide. Main event, Rikidozan and Enrique Torres defeating Jess Ortega and Mr. Atomic, 2 falls to 1. And for the 2nd time that I know of, the 3rd fall, Rikidozan is pinning Mr. Atomic.
Also on the card, King Kong Czaya scoring a pin over Yoshinosato, I noticed, too.
Oh, good point. And I also see Toriambori defeating Michiaki Yoshimura with a backslide. And after that, we're really just looking at
no Tarlok Singh.
No Tarlok Singh. No, Danny Plechas took care of Tarlok Singh in the World League match.
18,000 people out to see this, and they kind of stack this show. They have a bunch of the talent that weren't part of the World League matches. We see the tag team main events take place, but we got some of the other talent also working that weren't part of the World League tonight here, part of the undercard. So quite a show there for the 18,000 that came out to the Municipal Nikko Pool.
Yeah, I'd say when you bring in 7 outsiders of this quality, a lot of these cards, the fuller cards, look really, really good. Mm-hmm. I can't imagine the fans not being satisfied with these shows. We'll move on to the next show in the tournament, June 9th in Okayama, in front of 6,000 people. This is a TV taping, but it wouldn't air until later. Let's see. We have 3 World League matches. Kokichi Endo defeating Mr. Atomic in the 3rd round. But now we have Kokichi Endo defeating Mr. Atomic twice now? Is that true?
Yeah, because, well, the other tour was when Endo first came back, he defeated Mr. Atomic, and here in this tour now he beats him again with the toe hold. What's really curious to me is the time in which he used it, because I believe the rounds were 8 minutes long, yet the times in these rounds are a little different.
Yeah, it says 8 minutes, 15 seconds in the 3rd round, so I don't know if that's overtime. Mm-hmm. I don't know how any of this works. I'm glad I wasn't keeping track of it as it happened. I'd probably be disappointed. The other 2 matches that were part of the World League, Jess Ortega defeating Lord Blears in the 2nd round with a backbreaker, and Rikidozan going to a time limit draw with former longtime tag team partner Enrique Torres. So that's kind of a thank you for everything you've done move by Rikidozan, in my opinion.
I also have to point out that Tarlok Singh going to score a pinfall victory on this show over Yoshinosato. So it kind of shows you where I guess they were throwing Tarlock a bone here this late in the tour.
That's true. I will say that it took him 21 minutes and 40 seconds to secure that win over Yoshinosato. But when someone throws you a bone, you just say thank you.
And I think they're going to continue to do that. Moving forward, you lost enough.
Yeah, you've suffered enough, poor guy. We move on to June 11th in Matsusaka Municipal Stadium in front of 8,000 people. We've got 2 World League matches. Mr. Atomic defeating Danny Plechas in the 3rd round by DQ. Lord James Blears pins Toyombori in the 2nd round. Main event, Rikidozan and Kokichi Endo defeating Jess Ortega and King Kong 2 falls to 1. Rikidozan getting the final fall with a pin over Ortega. And Kokichi Endo, if you notice the 2nd fall, pins King Kong.
Yeah, Endo's scoring some big wins here. You would expect Rikidozan to get these wins over King Kong, over Ortega and whatnot in these tag team matches. But Endo's really been racking up the wins, not just in tag teams, but in singles as well. I think he's being used. He's always been the number 2 to Rikidozan. He's always been his right-hand man, it would appear. But it seems like he's being utilized better in this run than he has in the prior runs.
So now I'm left to go back in time, even farther back than June 1959. I'm coming back to April of 1959 when Endo first comes back.
Mm-hmm.
And I can imagine a discussion between him and Rikidozan talking about, why am I coming back if I'm not going to get paid? And said, don't worry, I'm going to take care of you. I wouldn't be surprised if some discussion of that nature occurred, saying, don't you worry about it. You're going to be put over really strong here, and I get a great idea for this tournament. I think we're going to make some money with this. Because that's how it's lining up to me. Endo's going over so strong in a lot of these matches. It looks like it's certainly purposeful, and there may be more to it. Like, this is how I was able to get Kokichi Endo to come back to JWA, because he already knows I'm not paying the wrestlers. But if I promise to put him over strong in this big tournament where I think I'm going to make money, then maybe I can get him to come back.
Well, we are getting down to the nitty-gritty now, Dan. Just a few shows left in this tour.
Yeah, on June 12th in Kyoto, Okazaki Industrial Hall in front of 7,000 people, we've got 2 World League matches. Lord Blears pinning King Kong in the 2nd round. Enrique Torres going to a draw with Mr. Atomic. Main event, Rikidozan and Toyombori defeating Jess Ortega and Danny Plechas 2 falls to 1. Toyombori with the final fall over Plechas with the bear hug. And this would appear on the television episode for that week. Enrique Torres versus Mr. Atomic League match would show, and the main event that we just discussed.
Right.
So that's your TV episode for June 12th.
Mm-hmm.
And we're almost to the end of this. It's getting exciting. Only a couple shows left in this tournament. June 13th in Toyama Sports Center in front of 10,000 people. So we've got the crowd back up to 10,000. And the World League matches show up to be Danny Plechas with a pin over Lord Blears in the 2nd round. Enrique Torres with a pin over Toyombori in the 2nd round. King Kong defeats Michiaki Yoshimura. Tarlock Singh with a win against Yoshinosato with the Boston Crab in 14 minutes and 50 seconds. So this is kind of another loaded show. The main event being Rikidozan and Kokichi Endo defeating Jess Ortega and Mr. Atomic, 2 straight falls. And Endo, continuing his major push, gets the first fall with a DQ over Atomic in 9 minutes and 10 seconds. So Endo still getting pushed over Atomic. Rikidozan still getting pushed over Atomic a little bit. But we haven't had that major singles main event match yet.
No, but it's coming.
So here's where the results being unclear hurts us. There are other World League matches, dates and locations unknown, where Mr. Atomic defeats Danny Plechas. Mr. Atomic draws against Toyombori and Enrique Torres. Toyombori defeats Danny Plechas. Lord James Blears defeats Toyombori.
And basically,
we make it.
We know that, Dan, because these are matches we didn't have results for, right, up until this point. So we know these guys had to have worked one another throughout the tour, and I guess there was some sort of result somewhere to where people can kind of get an idea of who drew who beat who in regards to where we're at right now in the league as we head into the final night, I do believe, of the league.
This is the final night. We are back at Tokyo Metropolitan Gym on June 15th, 1959, in front of 15,000 people. And it is a major show. We've got all the matches, 9, almost 10 matches. So we'll cover it, I guess, in the order that it occurs. We'll go with the big ones. Tarlok Singh with another win over Michiaki Yoshimura this time. 13 minutes and 5 seconds with a pin. King Kong pins Yoshinosato in 10 minutes, 30 seconds. That would have looked ugly because Yoshinosato's not that big. Kokichi Endo and Toriambori defeat the team of Danny Plechas and Lord Blears 2-1. Toriambori wins the final fall with a body scissors over Blears. So we have these semifinal World League matches. Mr. Atomic defeating Rikidozan in the third round by DQ.
Wow, that's bold.
Wow, all the way to the semifinal. Rikidozan, prohibitive favorite, I would think, loses to Mr. Atomic in the semifinals. So Mr. Atomic advances to the finals of this tournament. The other semifinal match, Jess Ortega goes to a time limit draw with Enrique Torres. Oh boy. All right, this is about to get complicated because now we have, technically, you have 3 finalists. You have Mr. Atomic, Jess Ortega, and Enrique Torres.
It's going to get more confusing than that when you see who's in the finals.
Yeah, let's keep going. So they have an overtime, another round, 8-minute round. And Jess Ortega and Enrique Torres go to a time limit draw again because there must be a winner and they're not going to be able to run this show to midnight. They flip a coin and Jess Ortega wins the right to wrestle in the finals by flipping a coin.
Wow.
So you would think now we're looking at Jess Ortega against Mr. Atomic for the first World League Championship, but somehow, some way, Rikidozan replaces Mr. Atomic because he's unable to continue due to injury.
That doesn't sound very fair. Why didn't Enrique Torres injure Jess Ortega after losing the coin flip? If that's all you had to do. All of this for what a convoluted finals, Dan, after everything that these guys went through this entire tour. It comes down to a coin flip and another guy basically winning his match but unable to continue. And I see a lot of notes down here underneath the results. I don't know if you want to get into those before you read the results.
I'm going to do that because Mr. Atomic winning in the third round by DQ over Rikidozan, we have more details than that.
Oh, yeah.
Rikidozan lost that match by DQ to Mr. Atomic when he unmasked him. But the masked man suffered an injury during the match, so Rikidozan was allowed to advance to the tournament final. Mm-hmm. This match that isn't even the main event of the show and of the tournament gained some interest because of how historically famous it was, because people point to it as, quote, the first match in Japan that featured a huge amount of blood. The truth is, Steves really didn't bleed that much, but a news reporter gave credence to the claim when he wrote, Mr. Atomic shed a huge amount of blood from his forehead and was severely injured. It's believed that Rikidozan asked the reporter to exaggerate Steve's condition in order to justify his advance to the final, even though he had lost it in the semifinal. So I'm sure you can go through a bunch of these, I didn't bleed as much as I should have, to warrant the result matches. The first one that springs to mind for me is Starrcade 84's main event when they have the boxer in there. I can't remember his name.
Joe Frazier.
Joe Frazier, when I think Dusty juiced just a little bit, and I think that was enough for him to stop the match.
And Dusty, of all people, didn't juice enough. That was just... So
it wasn't his fault because he definitely knows how to juice. It was just one of those things. I remember Lex Luger losing a title match against Flair with the tiniest bit of blood. It's unfortunate, but that's how it goes. So
this is also the 1950s, and in Japan they haven't even seen a whole lot of. It's not like Ric Flair was coming out there every night and gigging by this point on TV. So I don't know what they were expecting. Maybe just a little trickle of blood was enough to go, ooh, what is going on here? Because you got to remember, he didn't just make Mr. Atomic bleed. He unmasked him first and then made him bleed, or whichever order it was. Picture that, think about that in this era. That's some wild stuff to, oh my God, he ripped his mask off, something they've been waiting for since Mr. Atomic debuted, finally getting his comeuppance, getting his mask ripped off, and bleeding at the same time.
So that's the biggest payoff you can have with a masked wrestler. Forget about the pin, forget about a DQ or a submission. You get the mask off him, you have humiliated him and defeated him. It's like you've defeated his spirit as well, because now his identity is given up. It's almost like a retirement type thing.
So,
and that's the win that Rikidozan got over Atomic, and it wasn't even the final of the tournament.
Yeah, this is killing me, though. We just went through this entire tournament, all of these matches for naught, because the two men in the finals didn't necessarily earn that spot. Well, I can't say Ortega didn't earn it, but he earned it just as much as Enrique Torres did, and Ortega gets it by a simple flip of the coin. Then on the other side of the ring, the man who was eliminated in the semifinals actually gets to replace the man who won by the disqualification, even though Atomic basically, as you just said, humiliated and basically put away by Rikidozan here at the end of the tour. And so we get these two in the ring. It's going to be the finals of Rikidozan taking on Jess Ortega.
Correct. And in the second round, 35 seconds into the second round, Rikidozan pins Jess Ortega to win the first World League tournament.
Were you expecting somebody else to win?
No, but it's interesting that there was no pin. No one got pinned leading up to the final. There was a DQ with Rikidozan and Atomic, and Jess Ortega and Torres went to 2 draws.
Right.
So no one's been pinned yet tonight regarding the top guys. Rikidozan is the only guy to get a pin of the final 4 people in the World League tournament. So that kind of puts over the pin even more. Of course, it's against Jess Ortega. He's done it before. But the visual of him getting a pin over somebody after all these other matches with no conclusive winner must have been a big deal. I think that's kind of like the cherry on top when Rikidozan wrote this whole story out.
And this is where Enrique Torres should have came out to congratulate Ricky and then turned heel on Ricky and said, hey, I didn't get my shot against you. I never lost in this tournament. But that's another story for another day.
It would have been so easy to do, and that's reminiscent of, what was it, Wrestle War or Great American Bash? No, it was Wrestle War 89.
Talk about Funk Flair.
That's correct. Funk intervenes in that match, and it's just fun to see.
I would like a title shot.
Not bad at all. So we made it through the first World League, and the tour was over. It was a venture that involved great risk, but it brought great rewards to the JWA. It was reported that almost every show on the tour attracted more than 10,000 fans. I would say if you averaged all the shows we had data for, it was over 10,000 fans. Local promoters in the various towns, in the hopes of enjoying more box office successes, asked Rikidozan to hold additional shows in August.
And so we wrap up the World League here, Dan, and of course Rikidozan, the very first winner of the World League tournament. Go figure. But we look at all this talent. You talked about nobody really did a job there in the semifinals, not Jess Ortega, not Enrique Torres, not even Mr. Atomic. And then, of course, we get the finals, a great matchup, I'm sure, by all accounts. Once again, Rikidozan and Puro Ortega getting it on. But I think there's a good reason these are the final 4 men in the World League, because these are the same gaijin that will return for the following league here throughout the summer of 1959. I'm seeing here Puro Ortega, Enrique Torres, and Mr. Atomic returning for the summer tour here in 1959.
Well, wouldn't you know who won the pony? As
funny
the
how
great
that worked
Jim
out.
Cornette might say.
He may.
The 3 guys that basically were super over in the tournament, never took a pin until the final, are all coming back for another tour over the summer in JWA. Mm-hmm. Now, this is another tour where the results are, saying they're spotty is an insult to spotty results. We have shows with no results known. We have shows with just main events. It is mass hysteria here. Yeah, luckily, we do have a couple TV episodes, so we at least know what showed up on the TV shows.
Right. I was going to say, based on these results, and as you said, spotty at best, it's not something we really need to run through in regards to every result we have in front of our face here. That's for the people that want to go over to Patreon and kind of scroll along and look at everything that was going on throughout the summer. But certainly there is some TV here, and there are some fun main events throughout the tour.
Yeah, we can cover the main events or not cover, just knowing that there are only 3 guest foreigners. If it's not a 6-man tag, you know that Rikidozan and Torianbori or Rikidozan and Kokichi Endo are going to be fighting 2 of them. And whichever one, Endo or Torianbori, who isn't with Rikidozan, is probably fighting the 3rd one.
Right.
But they do start the very first show of the tour is that 6-man where it's Rikidozan, Torianbori, and Enrique Torres against Mr. Atomic, Jess Ortega, and Danny Plechas. How is Danny here? He's hiding. He wasn't listed as a guest foreigner. I claim
Well,
shenanigans.
he's been here all year, Dan, so maybe he's not a foreigner anymore. I'm not really sure, but yeah. Plechas is here, at least for this part of the tour, and he's part of this 6-man tag, and he's probably the guy who took the pinfall here, I'm guessing.
Yep, I'm also asserting that it's at this point that Danny Plechas gains dual citizenship between America and Japan. And you want to know who was at his ceremony to receive that dual citizenship?
I can only guess.
Can you guess?
I don't know.
None other than Jimmy Glarg.
Oh, Jimmy Glarg was good. I'm glad to see him back in Japan.
Yep, I made all of that up, but doesn't it sound entertaining? I should be a booker.
Yeah, need some Ombre in Montana, and then the world is set. I'm good.
June 19th, June 20th.
It's a whole lot of Rikidozan teaming with his buddies, Kokichi Endo, even Enrique Torres. Most of the matches, tag team matches, from what I can see, scoring wins over Mr. Atomic and Bull Ortega most nights. There is a match here on July 3rd, and I don't want to jump ahead. I know there's some TV here in between, but there's a rematch of sorts. We saw this much earlier in the World League, and it ended in a draw. It's going to end in a draw here again in Sapporo on July 3rd. Rikidozan going up against good buddy Enrique Torres. So while Torres was eliminated by a coin flip, Rikidozan still can't seem to score that win.
Yep, and I would play off, and I probably should have thought of this, with Rikidozan defeating him in the tournament. Remember what Enrique Torres went through. He went through 4 8-minute rounds, still didn't have a winner, so he'd wrestled for 32 minutes. Enrique Torres said, well, I put up a good fight, but I was tired, meaning Rikidozan didn't work as hard as I did that night. So Rikidozan gives him the drawback on July 3rd. We'll go to that television episode on June 26th. It was a live broadcast from Sendai, Miyagi Prefecture in the Sendai City Leisure Center. The top 2 matches there, Toyonbori against Danny Plechas. Toyonbori would win that. And in the main event, Rikidozan and Enrique Torres defeat the team of Mr. Atomic and Jess Ortega. So this looks like a good TV episode. The main house shows, like the 8-match shows, do not look nearly as exciting as all of the World League matchups were because they don't have as many outsiders participating. So this is kind of a step down from the World League, but hopefully they make some money. We have so little data from this tour. I'm looking at going forward from July 3rd.
Yeah, it's a whole lot of Rikidozan teaming with Toyonbori following that time period, it looks like. And again, most nights they're scoring tag team victories over Mr. Atomic and Jess Ortega, all the way really through the end of the tour for the most part, as best I can see.
Yeah, I've got a July 10th television episode, Kokichi Endo defeating Yoshinosato, which Yoshinosato hasn't been featured until now. It's been a while since we've seen him.
Right.
In the main event, Rikidozan and Toyonbori and Enrique Torres, a 6-man against Jess Ortega, Mr. Atomic, and Danny Plechas. So that main event has got everybody involved in it. We move forward from that television episode, a lot of results not known. And yeah, I've got a TV episode on July 24th with Rikidozan defeating Jess Ortega in the main event, Toyonbori and Kokichi Endo against Enrique Torres and Mr. Atomic for TV. We have 2 more TV episodes. August 7th, we have Rikidozan fighting Mr. Atomic. Finally, August 7th, we get the one-on-one matchup that isn't part of a tournament, a traditional singles matchup. And Rikidozan defeats Mr. Atomic 2 straight falls in less than just over 17 minutes total bell-to-bell time.
We typically call that a blow-off.
That is the blow-off of all blow-offs, and they made money with Mr. Atomic for all those months, for 3 straight months, and then they said, okay, buddy, it's time to go home, and he did it. And that was in the Denon Coliseum, which was a famous Coliseum. All Japan, New Japan would have some major, major shows in that Coliseum.
14,000.
Yep. So because this was a live show, and Denon Coliseum, if you're not aware, it's an outside Coliseum. It's an outside venue. In the event of rain, they recorded a Rikidozan versus Enrique Torres match just in case the main event, the show was going to get rained out. So for those of you keeping score at home, somewhere in the archives, there's a Rikidozan versus Enrique Torres match that didn't have to air, because it didn't rain on August 7th. The next episode, August 21st, this one is recorded all the way back in June 9th. I don't know if you remember, it was probably about a half hour ago. One of the World League shows was taped for TV, but we didn't see it air. Even though the tournament's long over, this is from June 9th, and they had the World League official match. It was Enrique Torres versus Rikidozan.
And I believe that match ended in a draw back in June.
That's correct. And Rikidozan provides commentary over the match.
Rikidozan commentary on his match.
Yep, and that would be utilized by Antonio Inoki several times, and I think Baba at least once, where you'd see a little insert picture in the corner of a match that is obviously taped prior because he's giving commentary on his own match over it.
We would see that a lot in Georgia with the old Omni stuff, too, with the guys talking about everything that was going on and explaining. Of course, that was a little more elaborate in storyline versus a World League here, but I'm curious to see Rikidozan, Mr. Humble himself, doing commentary over one of his matches.
Yeah, I can only imagine he did everything he could to put himself over. So we're going to move on to the next tour, which is the International Competitions of the Fall. It would begin on September 4th and would run all the way to Christmas of 1959.
Right.
Now, I will say we have a lot more foreigners than the last time.
We do, but who are they exactly is my question, because I'm looking at the list here, and of all the foreigners on here, Larry Jackson did a little bit, but it's Mike Paidousis is really the only name I strongly recall. Red Miller, we've talked about him in the past, Bulldog Butcher, those are guys who were part of the military service who happened to be stationed over in Japan, and so they would come calling for guys like that. And Jim Wright as well, I do believe. I see him on this list, and I think he's also another one of those guys.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if Jim Sorensen, Alex Jacobides, if they're not also from General HQ or the military base that's local. So we'll find out. We've got some words about this tour. Great Togo comes to Japan for a new tour. So I've got some info on the Great Togo. Why not? Who doesn't want to know more about the Great Togo? His real name was George Kazuo Okamura, born in Hood River, Oregon. Parents were reported to have been immigrants from Kumamoto. They don't know much about his early career. Your average, typical, stereotypical, in fact, Oriental wrestler until World War II broke out. The war subjected him to an ordeal as he was one of the people that went to the internment camps in America and suffered severe discrimination.
Wow.
I think between the two, I would rather just be discriminated against than end up in an internment camp.
Sure.
So it's like saying I was put in an internment camp and I also stubbed my toe. Let's not bury the lead. The internment camp was not the best deal for the Japanese Americans. After the war, he worked his way up from the bottom, using his painful experience to his advantage. He devoted himself to being the stereotypical, sneaky Japanese person in the East and Canada in the 1950s.
That is not what it says, Dan, but okay.
I am not going to use the three-letter truncated version of Japanese that they were referred to at the time. Not necessary. I'm not Jim Ross. Sometimes wrestled with his gimmick brothers, Tosh Togo, otherwise known as Harold Sakata. We know him.
Oh, yeah.
Mas Togo, Japanese by way of Mexico. Matsutasu Oyama, karate expert, or Ko Togo, Kokichi Endo. And he did become, Great Togo did become rich enough to live in a stately mansion in Los Angeles. Who else lives in a stately mansion? Is that Batman? Who's got the stately Wayne Manor?
Yeah, yes. Stately Wayne Manor, of course.
Nailed it. Rikidozan may have wondered whether he should have had Togo play the role of the babyface or the heel as he did in America. During his first tour in Japan, Togo wrestled as a bad guy. Regardless, the sneaky Japanese person enjoyed great popularity in his parents' homeland of Japan, so that was the last tour in which Togo was a villain. Japanese wrestling fans had become accustomed to the pattern of Japanese good guy versus American bad guy matches. They were puzzled when Togo behaved in an immoral manner by breaking the rules. Togo got along well with Rikidozan and became the booker for JWA.
Wow,
that is wow. I'm surprised he handed off the reins.
Yeah.
He had a broad range of personal connections. And from then on, he worked for Rikidozan as a booker rather than a babyface wrestler. He made frequent visits from Japan before Rikidozan's death. So maybe I'm reading between the lines here, but he gives him the booker role because he has the connections in the States to get talent to Japan. That's my guess out of that.
That would make sense. And that we would see that continue for years to come. Gaijin basically giving the reins as the booker, or at least helping in the booking in All Japan and things of that nature later on, because they were able to bring in talent from the United States, Canada, etc.
Yeah, and that would work for, I believe, IWE as well. Tokyo Pro, believe it or not. I think they had somebody who was, for the short-lived promotion, there was the go-between that was able to get guys to come in. So it's been utilized. This technique's been utilized before.
I don't really want to spoil this for anyone, but after reading so many results as we have already on this episode, I don't want to keep doing that to the listeners either. And as I scrolled through this, there's really not a whole lot going on here. Rikidozan back out of the ring, working as a referee more often than not, it looks like, from what I've gathered here, Dan, anyway. And just a whole lot of guys off the base, the military base here, working these matches against some of the local talent here in Japan. Mike Paidousis is here. That's all I really got.
Yeah.
And,
the only thing I wanted
to keep Larry Jackson, who was an actual worker, I believe, from Texas. They seem to have him kind of lumped in with Paidousis and sometimes Togo. And that's because they are the only guys who are actually professional wrestlers here of this entire group of guys that were announced as foreign talent.
Yeah, this tour, unlike the tour prior to that, they are not spending anything on outside talent for this tour. I did want to make note, though, of the October 2nd episode of TV, because it is the first professional wrestling event broadcast live from a TV studio, and it was at the Nippon TV studios. So the studio wrestling you grew up with, or you might be watching on YouTube or what have you, from Georgia, from Florida, from in the 70s anyway, from everywhere was studio wrestling. This is the first time it's happened in Japan, October 2nd, 1959. So take note of that at least. The TV results are also weird because I'm getting notes that there were different matches originally scheduled, and somehow they're all getting changed when it airs on TV. They're doing different matches. So not only are they not interesting, they're also a mess. There's no big heel to fight, to wrestle. So how is this compelling compared to the other tours over the year?
Totally agree. Yeah, it's just like they're announcing matches, and then when they get there, it's like Rikidozan or somebody's walking in there going, "Yeah, let's just move this around," because all the talent's still there. They're just changing the matches for whatever reason. But I did notice here, you talk about the first time ever on in a TV studio, professional wrestling coming to you in Japan from the TV studio. And of course, who books themselves in the main event but Rikidozan himself? And of all the people that he takes on, of all the people he has an opportunity to wrestle here, he chooses the most proficient professional wrestler on the list, Mike Paidousis. So Rikidozan always knows what he's doing.
He does. He seems like he's got a real knack for this. Amongst all the other folks that he's bringing in from the outside, so to speak, for this tour, he knows that on TV, before this tour is over, he's got to go up, to commemorate this first TV studio wrestling match. He's going up against Mike Paidousis. So, again, this guy's got it figured out. We will have plenty of time to talk about Rikidozan and why he wasn't successful. I mean, in the end, he just created so much trouble for himself that was, I would call it an unforced error in tennis. Things that he didn't have to do that just made his life harder.
He kept finding himself in these holes, but he somehow kept managing to dig himself out of these holes. But unfortunately, he would just fall into another hole, and he did it to himself.
Yeah, multiple times. He was his own worst enemy, so to speak.
Right, absolutely. I did see the results here. I'm kind of surprised Rikidozan does not go over this match. He's going to go to a draw here in the TV studio with Mike Paidousis. But again, I go back to, of all the names on that list that he had to choose from, he chooses the guy who likely the best worker of all of them for sure.
That is true. And we continue going through TV episodes that make no sense, that have these tag matches or 6-man tags that end up being something else, to the chagrin of everyone who's trying to keep track of what the heck is going on in this promotion.
I'll tell you what, these guys can leave their military base quite often.
Yeah, they get a lot of time off. I did not get that much time off in my military time, so at least somebody got a good deal.
Well, you weren't wrestling in Japan, though.
That's true. I was never offered a chance to wrestle. I was recruited to be a wrestler, but we can cover that at another time.
Oh, that's
1988. Fun. It's a real true story. I wrote a story about it. Let's go all the way to Christmas. Everyone likes Christmas, don't they? At least they did in Tokyo in the Niwacho Pro Wrestling Center, the Pro Wrestling Center. Interesting.
Do they celebrate Christmas in Japan? I don't know about that.
I don't know. With I bet you. Let's see who we have. Jim Wright and Bulldog Butcher probably celebrated it.
Okay.
Poor Jimmy Glarg.
Yeah, Jimmy Glarg didn't come back for this tour, unfortunately. That would have been something to talk about at least. But there's not a lot going on basically throughout the fall into the end of the year here in 59. Basically, Rikidozan put all of his money into the World League, and they had a fun little summer run as well. But hopefully he just saved that money. Or, well, actually, we know he didn't. Hopefully some of these guys got paid anyway.
Yep, this year is an interesting year where it definitely peaked in the middle, and then it trailed off a little bit in the summer and then disappeared for the final 4 months. Just like 4 months of nothing happening, where even the TV is not interesting. Most of the results don't exist. I will say that this is the last year, I think, that the results are generally unknown or maybe even unsearched for. But who's going to do a lot of research when the guys wrestling are Alex Jacobides and Jim Sorensen?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
No one's going to fight too hard to come up with that. So we end the year. Let's look at it this way. Rikidozan puts all of his money on black on the roulette table in the way that he promoted the World League, and it actually came up. So he lives to fight another day. He made a ton of money. It was very popular. People were begging for him to have more shows. So ostensibly, he's making some money off of these shows because there's interest from local promoters. And he ends the year with a whimper with a bunch of guys probably from the military base. And he may be doing it just to have shows. It doesn't appear like he's got a goal for that last tour of the year. He's not pushing anybody. He's not putting anybody over other than the televised studio TV match that he wrestles Paidousis. It doesn't seem there's any rhyme or reason for the few shows that we have with good amount of results from the house shows. I don't know what he's doing or why, other than just treading water getting into 1960.
Well, just going back through the year, I mean, it wasn't very long ago that they lost TV altogether. They get it back, and he comes back with this idea, this World League deal. He puts all his money, like you said, on black, and he hits. And unfortunately, he's going to continue to keep betting. It's his problem, literally and figuratively. But, look at the talent that he established here. He knows what he's doing booking wise. I mean, he's ahead of the game. I don't know who's in his ear helping him with all of this booking. I can't see him coming up with all of this by himself, but he's doing everything so well in regards to building up the Mr. Atomic character, the deal with the loaded mask. And then, of course, eventually not blowing it away right away at the end of that tour, using the World League and beyond to kind of promote his feud that he can't seem to get the best of Mr. Atomic. Then he unmasks him. He leaves him bleeding. Then they wait and have the actual blow off later on. 2 straight falls. Rikidozan goes over. The guy knows what he's doing booking wise. And then it's like you said, it was like that last tour after they did the summer tour, that fall tour into Christmas was just an afterthought. It's like, well, I got to put something out. So let's call the military base again.
Yeah. I wonder if Rikidozan was occasionally getting calls from Nippon TV just in like November with some of these TV results. I'm wondering if the conversation's like, hey, buddy, what's going on with your shows? You going to have anyone worth watching? Because our ratings are not doing well when you're going to fight this Sorensen dude every other week.
Well, that would explain why, early on, if you watch that fall tour, Rikidozan initially, he's not really getting into the ring, right? But later on, as the tour progresses, you do see him start to wrestle, like against Mike Paidousis. So you do start seeing Rikidozan wrestle there near the end. And that very well could have been the phone call that was made. You better get in there and do something, dude, because this is not working.
Yeah, well, like I said, they were in like a lion, out like a lamb. 1959 ends with a whimper, not a bang, but that's okay because when he needed it, when the chips were down, he hit. And he got that World League over. The fans were ready for it. They were excited. Mr. Atomic worked. So overall, this is a up year for JWA. Let's just see how much of money of it he actually gives back to the wrestlers. That's a story we're going to be telling in the next year in 1960, and that'll be our next episode.
Yeah, the big story really here was the World League and Mr. Atomic, of course. But Yeah, the World League really just changed everything. It helped Rikidozan rebuild, so to speak, and it got a lot of big names back into this. Well, the most big names compiled in one tour yet here for Japan, I'd have to say, with all those guys involved. And then, as you said, 1960, another big year, and I know we keep saying that, guys, but there's a couple of names that you'll be very familiar with that's going to be making their debut on this show here next time around.
Yep, and one question coming from 59 into 60, will Rikidozan be able to keep Kokichi Endo, Torambori, Yoshinosato, keep them happy and satisfied, or are they going to run off to Hawaii or Brazil or somewhere to make money? Are we going to run through that again where he stops paying the wrestlers again? These questions will be answered in the next episode.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Again, we're going to see the return of some of these guys that we saw here in the fall, unfortunately. A Bulldog Butcher, a Red Miller, but we're also going to see some other names coming to town, and I'm looking forward to getting into that. And I'm also looking forward to touching on, again, some of the very most popular names in Japanese wrestling history. They're going to become part of the story here on the Puro Wrestling Academy next time around. Can't wait to get to it.
All right, that's all we have for this week. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, class is dismissed.